to the Hoboken Museum. It's a beautiful day outside. I think it's going to be a beautiful day inside as well. My name is Danny Schott, and I'm the poet in residence of the Hoboken Museum. I'd like to thank Bob Foster, Vera Sirota, Rand Hoppy, Kara, and the entire staff for making this space and this idea welcoming for poetry. I'd also like to mention it's a free event, but if you have a few bucks in your pocket, there's the donation box there, and that's so we can continue doing events like this. I would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize our responsibility to the original caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Lenape tribe, and all their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. The Lenape named our city Hoboken, which in their language means land of the tobacco pipe, or simply long pipe. The Lenape were promised their own sovereign state in New Jersey for fighting against the British during the American Revolution. Government lied. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the red chickens. That's a poem most everyone knows, and it's what most everyone knows about Carlos Williams. It's a simple poem, yet Williams was not a simple poet or a simple man. I'd say he was often rather complicated. William Carlos Williams was born the first of two sons of an English father and a Puerto Rican mother, and he grew up in Rutherford, New Jersey. He was a medical doctor, a poet, a novelist, an essayist, and a playwright. With Ezra Pound and H.D., Williams was a leading poet of the Imagist movement and often wrote of American subjects and American themes. A doctor for more than 40 years serving the citizens of Rutherford, he relied on his patients and the America and the New Jersey around him to create a distinctively American verse and an American voice. So I was thinking, okay, we always start these things off with a poem. And I was looking at, I went down the Williams rabbit hole, and I originally went to the poem Autumn by him, because today, I think is, I don't know if it's the last day of summer or the first day of autumn. First day of autumn. But it was a grim little poem. I was like, no way. It just bummed me out looking at it. So let me just read one of my favorite poems by Williams. It's called Dance Roost. If I, when my wife is sleeping, and the baby and Kathleen are sleeping, and the sun is a flame white disk in silken mists above shining trees, if I, in my north room, dance naked, grotesquely before my mirror, waving my shirt around my head and singing softly to myself, I am lonely, lonely. I was born to be lonely, I best so. If I admire my arms, my face, my shoulders, flanks, buttocks, against the yellow-drawn shades, who shall say I am not the happy genius of my household? So we have four terrific poets with us today. We're supposed to have five, but Frank Rubino, who I was very much looking forward to seeing and hearing from, couldn't make it because he's undergoing complications from back surgery. And Frank, if you're watching online, we wish you were here, but you're sort of here. So, our first poet to come up She was born and raised in Paterson, New Jersey. Catherine Doty is the author of Wonderama, which I assure you is a wonderful, terrific book of poetry. So much so that it won the Paterson Poetry Prize. And also Momentum, which did not, but I bet is a really good book also, both from Captain Kerry Press. She is the recipient of a fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts and many other really nice prizes, and has taught poetry all over the place for a very long time. Let's have a Hoboken round of applause for Catherine Doty.
Oh, thank you, Dan. And thank you, Vera. Can I put this down on you?
Of course.
I don't have a coaster.
It's okay.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here and to read with my wonderful colleagues. I look forward to it. I love William Carlos Williams. I have loved him for a very long time. And I was so young when I began to love him that I thought, he was a personal friend of mine, and I would refer to him waggishly as Bill C. Bills, which no one thought was funny or interesting.
I always called him Willie Williams.
Yeah. Okay. This is pastoral. The little sparrows hop ingenuously about the pavement, quarreling with sharp voices over those things that interest them. But we who are wiser shut ourselves in on either hand, and no one knows whether we think good or evil. Meanwhile, the old man who goes about gathering dog line walks in the gutter without looking up, and his tread is more majestic than that of the Episcopal minister approaching the pulpit of a Sunday. These things astonish me beyond words. Yeah, well done! Okay. Let's see. Okay, this is called Eggs. And this is something that happened in South Paterson. We wanted to neck, like they did, we'd heard, at parties, on couches with people watching us work our jaws. We wanted to slug from a bottle, eyes rolled back, but we needed a party skill, so we'd get asked. The library book said, a great trick for any party, so Evelyn and me in her mother's kitchen sucked eggs. Hard-boiled eggs through the neck of a glass milk bottle. A twist of newspaper on fire you put in first. Then set your clean peeled egg on the bottle's neck, and the fire gets hungry for air and shivers it in with a rubbery pop of relief and a puff of black breath. We told Evelyn's mom we were practicing social graces, but she charged us a nickel a pop, called it playing with food, and as each gray egg flecked with shell, smudged with carbon thumbprints, grunted like a spelunker and shot its guts, she got madder, shaking her head like a cat with canker. When egg number 8 slipped its hips and blew its brains, she hollered she knew why we never got asked to parties. And clean up this mess and the cat box too, goddammit. Evelyn wiped her hands on her yellow shorts, smudging Davy Crockett's face with soot. We rolled up our mess in the Friday morning call and went out to wander Chadwick Street at noon, swinging our butts and all our eggs in 2 baskets, shivering with our potential to fuck with fire. The Mainway Market was on Main Street, right across from St. Joe's Hospital. It's outside the Mainway Market. Before I read this, I have to ask you, how many of you have ever ridden little horses, little 25-cent? No? Okay.
I still do.
You mean
What horses?
Oh, I'm sorry?
like mechanical ones where you put the quarter in and...
Yes, yeah, right? Nobody ever warned you about the danger of those things. Your parents just plopped you on there because they had a quarter. I feel sorry for you. This is called Outside the Mainway Market. Every day our mother says, kids die on those goddamn things. And she nods at the lone yellow horse with the red vinyl bridle and 4 black shining hoods like police hat brims. Not only do we stop our 5-part begging, we walk wide around the beast, though Mary brushes the coin box with her sleeve. Rigid in flight, the great horse's legs flange out toward us. Not one of us argues. We hold on to our mother's coat, cross several streets, touch the dog we always touch when we walk home, scratching his freckled snout. Then we scream and run in the yard while supper cooks, and the sky shudders pale for some seconds before it darkens, as if in that lavender moment 3 blocks away, a child drops the reins and gasps as his shoes fly off, and plumes of smoke rise from the crown of his hand-knit hat. Oh, no children will harm. 52 Canal Street. The house, of course, is gone. The sled path's steepness, flat as the hopscotch slate path, gone now too. Birchwood, violet bank, and pear tree gone. Forked ash, where we oiled my sister's wedged knee free, felled, with the 3 black cherries in a row. Gone their sweet blackberries, small as peas, clots of bright sap, black bark to peel like sunburn, and backhoed into the ruined animal graves. Cat-killed rabbits and parts of rabbits. The cats, too, knot-headed toms wrapped in pastel scarves. Phosphorescent decay and bright small bones. Shoebox and matchbox and brown paper grocery bag. Boxer dog under where once stood a stand of grape. All the rich good that we children gave stroke, bite, and kiss. And the only dollar we had once, rolled up and fed to the hole in the bathroom wall. Good, thank you. Okay. Grandma. Someone said to me, no one needs another grandma poem, especially if it concerns a rocking chair or noodles. So this is called Grandma. Mischief made her lift her arms and turn with such a look of wonder on her face that I was not afraid to see the flames licking along both sleeves of her flannel robe, but stepped back, as one does from an act of God, the better to take in her glittering pale green eyes, her pirate's nose, the few yellow teeth in her little open mouth. As my mother, her own mouth open in a scream, rushed up behind her to yank off the blazing robe and dance on its burning. And Grandma, naked, jubilant, winked at me while the kettle shrieked its way to boiling dry, and sent me from some far hilltop in her far world a vision of what it was certain I'd become. Wild-eyed and crazy and blazing like a 6-gun, nothing at all to be met with shame or fear. So this is for her, who now has long been ash, a chronicle, the last word of which is, oh. Standing, 1964. See her clothes as they drop in the yellow weeds, t-shirt and shorts in the upraised arms of the yarrow. Her arms are lifted too. She exults or prays. She is narrow and flat, her skin white as surrender. The thatchy back of her head is a patch of knots. Her teeth are rotted, but then so are theirs, bared as the boys reach to touch her, not unkindly. They are 16, and she is half their age. Above them, a star goes dark, or many darken. A sky-cleaving jet unfurls 4 slender trails. She feels like the pine cone seed that split the boulder, the bullet exploding the head of the president, once invisible, once inconsequential, now singular at last in her rightful place. Salesman. I sweep dog hair off my pants with a stand-home valet, a brush and shoehorn combo that sells itself, except where dogs and cats outnumber pants, like this dead-end street at the foot of Garrett Mountain, where sales recruits are sent to pitch brushes and saucepans and life insurance and Bibles and family portraits to an inbred clan so sullen, so slack-jawed and squinty that census takers resort to ballpark figures. Left behind on one gritty surface or another, a business card, rubber stamped with the name Joe Good, which is not my name but company code for poor. Though none will call, I can claim each one as a contact. The dirt on my shoes from their houses, I wipe on the grass. This is dusk. Evening profers a pink lick above Garrett Mountain, translucent as a potholder, Paterson sky. When I was about 10, Franny moved upstairs for me. She was about 10, and she was about to start Catholic school and had never really learned to read. And, you know, we were supposed to spend a lot of time together and get Franny up to speed. So this is advice for her. It's called New Girl in Town. Cross the street, Franny, if ever you spy Joe Moe, whose hand-hewn tar paper shack we approach on bets, or pitch chunks of pudding stone at from moving cars. You'll want to skirt Donna's uncles, drunk and jolly, who'll sneak through your screen door with snow cones and try to kiss you, and Ronnie V, who just got out of Rahway. We're not supposed to know what got him there. And St. Ag's School is an iron maiden of dangers. Those statues of saints peer out of each dusky corner, and Jesus, his plaster self, tops the entrance stairs, where one day he stared at a second grader's vomit, hand held before his exposed and flaming heart, as if to express distaste for incarnation. Expect more shame to be handed out than blessings, administered lavishly both in word and deed. For girls, 18 inches of steel on open palms. For boys, once slung across a nun's black lap, lusty wax on the seat of his regulation pants. So that's about it, Fran. Except for that candy store where the old guy gives out wax lips for Halloween and ends of cold cuts to the dogs he lets inside. He'll say, "Sweetheart, you look pale. Are you on the rag?" If you're hungry, Franny, tell him yes. He'll put his hand on your stomach and then on your forehead, then tell you you're clammy, then toast you a piece of toast. Franny takes advice. When somebody old enough to be somewhat wise tells Franny the way to survive at Kennedy High is to land the first blow the second evil approaches, she does, having given no thought to evil's friends who sinister their way into the bathroom, where soon, in a litter of chewed gum and cigarette butts, gullibility lies like Gulliver on the beach, long black hair divided to fill 10 fists. This is Condemned, 52 Canal Street, and it's in 3 parts, so I'll go with that or something. 1. Franny and I leave school with Debbie Nank, who's heard about Franny's house and wants to see it, and maybe step inside if she has the nerve. But because it's Friday, and Friday means Kraft macaroni, Franny runs the steep last block alone. Debbie freezes when we reach Franny's slumping porch, the house with its caving roof and glassless windows. She confides in me that if that's where she had to live, she'd race to the footbridge and hurl herself into the falls. Then she asked me where I live, which is downstairs from Franny. And this is too. Before waddling off to snooze in the dark all day, our mother's possum peeks out from his hole in the wall, one seeded each evening with berries and cold spaghetti, and night crawlers pried from the ground with a carving fork. In volume O of a neighbor's funk and wagnalls and dawn's primal light, with coffee and some despair, she learns that the only marsupial in our country, not to mention the first one ever to live in her kitchen, belongs to the least evolved of all the species. Like her, for millions of years he hasn't changed. But for now she takes solace in her possum's opposable thumbs, the phalanx of fangs he bears in a pink-tongued yawn. Soon her children will waken and plague her with their needs. This is 3. While Peggy draws John Lennon on the wall, I print in magic marker on the ceiling a poem I love about poppies and the dead. Mary cracks black walnuts with a rock and finds and feeds the pieces to our sister Judy, who pries the rusted lid from a can of house paint so she and Tommy can camouflage their beds. In the kitchen, our happy mother plays Nelson Eddy so loud that it drowns out the screams of the couple upstairs. She is the reason, she tells us, why we are so smart. And smarts you can't buy, or we'd sell ours and get a TV. Okay, this is JC and me in the summer of '64. Catholicism and puberty duked it out the summer my body broke out of its corral and galloped Paterson streets in search of sugar through the new and luscious grasses of impure thought. The priest I confessed to dismissed me as overly scrupulous. I was thinking too much about thinking of dirty things, and distracted because the word scrupulous started with screw. I left with a head full of sin and 2 holy cards, which he passed me as if they were discards in holy strip poker, a game I imagined instructive and entertaining. The first was Saint Agatha, Sicily's virgin martyr, her eyes rolled up to God, as often mine were. She would not renounce him, despite the terrible tortures he could, having been God, have simply plucked her from. If it were me, I'd have just said, Jesus, who? Then cantered right out of there with my virgin self and ducked behind the bleachers at Hinchliffe Stadium. The second holy card was Jesus himself, bathed in a golden light and softly smiling, halo tipped back, and eyes beaming mercy and mirth. I hadn't noticed till then how handsome he was. Eyes like blue poppies, a nose I regarded with envy, wavy auburn hair with a center part. I pictured the halls of St. Agnes full of boys in caftans, and me with my black hair tossing in the hot pink short shorts that got me suspended from school. Imagine, I thought, when he too was confused and changing, not quite a man yet, and almost, but not quite, God. Hear me calling his name, though he's already heading toward me, the August wind blowing his robe between his legs, the power to miracle lighting his holy face, a gingery fuzz on his lip, and an eager smile telling me I have powers too. At my nearness, his thoughts will cleave the Paterson Falls, send beer cans and tires jouncing down McBride, and cause the all-the-way hot dogs at Libby's lunch to vault like angels from their very secret sauce.
Thank you, Kat Doty. Let's hear once again for Paterson's own. Just a word about poetry reading event etiquette. You know, I've read all over the country, all over the place, but we're in New Jersey, so it's okay to clap or comment when people are reading. It's not considered bad manners here, so feel free to shout encouragement, clap, yell, stomp your feet, whatever.
Okay, watch out.
John J. Trautman, the director of Oradell Public Library, is the author of 6 books of poetry and 1 of parody, Latter-day Litany, which was staged off-Broadway. His translations, poetry, prose, scholarship, and visual work appear internationally in many journals and anthologies. He is the subject of a 30 on 30 in 30 essay on the operating system written by Don Zerilli, and at the same site, an author of an essay on Baroness Elsa, who stalked William Carlos Williams, and maybe if we're lucky, John will tell us about that. He is a founder of the William Carlos Williams Poetry Cooperative, aka the Red Wheelbarrow, in Rutherford, New Jersey, and the former host and curator of its monthly reading series. At various times in his life, he has been mistaken for being a priest, a policeman, a pimp, and a pornographer. He is fond of cunning acrostics and color-coded chiasmus. Come on, let's hear for John J.
Thank you, Danny, and thank you, Vera, and thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. This is such an honor to pay tribute to one of my favorite poets, William Carlos Williams, whom I didn't really know as a child. My mother had his work in the house, but she never shared it with me, as she shared so much else. However, she did say, William Carlos, our Dr. Williams, William Eric Williams, had a very famous father who was a writer. So I like to tell people that I spent many hours of misery in William Carlos Williams' old house on 9 Range Road as a child. Vaccines, illness, and so forth. So I would like, if I may, read a couple of poems before I begin my own by Williams, if that's okay. So I'll read William Carlos Williams' Portrait of a Lady. T.S. Eliot also wrote A Portrait of a Lady, and so I like to unite them in one of my poems, which we'll get to. But this is William Carlos Williams' Portrait of a Lady. Your thighs are apple trees whose blossoms touch the sky. Which sky? The sky where Watteau hung a lady slipper. Your knees are a southern breeze or a gust of snow. Ah, what sort of man was Fragonard? As if that answered anything. Ah yes, below the knees, since the tune drops that way, it is one of those white summer days, the tall grasses of your ankles flickers upon the shore. Which shore? The sand clings to my lips. Which shore? Ah, petals maybe, how should I know? Which shore? Which shore? The petals from some hidden apple tree. Which shore? I said petals from an apple tree. William Carlos Williams. Thank you. So he makes reference mistakenly to a famous painting by Jean-Henri Fragonard, known as the Swing, le Bonsoir in French, and T.S. Eliot in his Mr. Pollinax makes reference to the same painting and also makes a slight error or an intentional error on the attribution of the painting. So I'd like to unite the two of them. These two supposed rivals actually had probably far more in common than they had separating them. So I'll read snip, snip, snip. Oh, it's in one of my books. It's in Inside Out, Upside Down, and Round and Round. And if anybody's interested, I do have books for sale. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not in Snip, Snip, Snip. This is embarrassing. Okay, it's in Exercises in High Treason, I'm sorry. Snip, snip, snip. A day in Messidor. And the epigraph is, what wonder then, fair nymph, thy hair should feel the conquering force of unresisted steel. And that's from Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock. 1. On long summer days, what days? Hot days. I'm all too conscious of my long hair. What hair? The hair on my head. What hair? My thick, long hair, my dry and dispassionate hair, my untouched hair. What sort of woman was Fenelon? 2. Yes, my hair needs a cutting. It's long once again, so I rise from my chair, surrendering, bending my head in that mechanical chair, that cold mechanical chair. I thought of Fenelon, that spry figure among the barracks, amid the clippings ready to be harvested, with Allons enfants de la patrie etched in her heart, those scratched in her larynx, and branded in her eyes, Arbeit macht frei, and of Albert Anastasia spilled on the floor amid the clippings. I too am there, among the steel, among the hair, among Rockamoi clippings. Thank you. And now I'm going to read another famous poem by William Carlos Williams called The Great Figure. He was on his way, I believe it was to Morrison Hartley's studio, is that correct? Stieglitz's? Oh, Stieglitz's studio, or his gallery, 380. And when he happened to, he was in New York City, William Carlos Williams, and he happened to hear and see this, and he called it The Great Figure. Among the rain and lights, I saw the figure 5, in gold, on a red fire truck, moving tense, unheeded, to gong clangs, siren howls, and wheels rumbling through the dark city. William Carlos Williams. Yes, so of course, his good friend, William Carlos Williams' good friend, Charles Demuth, was a painter, and he did a number in the 1920s, did a number of, I guess you would call them portrait paintings, but not really portraits of the person whom they represent. So this is the one he did for his friend, William Carlos Williams, where the figure 5 is repeated in gold. And of course, this has been copied by, or echoed by many, many, many other artists. When I was living in Cincinnati in the mid-'80s, I remember there was one mural by a local artist who included the repetition of the 5. And one of my favorites is Catherine Porter's, which is simply 5. She painted just the 5. So also, this poem that I'm going to read is called Snip. Oh, I'm sorry, it's from my book of poems on art, film, photography, art history. It's called Picture This for Your Eyes and Ears. And this is a poem about the photograph, or a series of photographs, by Richard Avedon, who's known as a fashion photographer, but also as a great portraitist, of William Carlos Williams seated with Ezra Pound standing behind him. This was at 9 Ridge Road in Rutherford, right after Ezra Pound was released from St. Elizabeth's Hospital, where he had been interned as well, you know, I'm sure you know the story. And he was a traitor, and rather than go to a prison, he went to a mental hospital. So this piece is called, and so what I'm doing is I'm echoing both Williams, Pound, T.S. Eliot, Allen Ginsberg, and other work by John J. Traust. Portrait de deux hommes ou quatre poètes. On a photographic portrait of William Carlos Williams and Ezra Pound. And as the epigraph, William Carlos Williams says, "For God's sake, don't come. Ezra just got out of St. Elizabeth's. We sneaked him in here. The press suspects he's here, and we're in a state of siege." The scene arranges itself as it will seem to do, and this is another scene. Bill, Dear Bull, WCW, Carlo, stricken Williams sits solidly and looks away, smiling, distant, recalling the plums, the masses of white flowers and the figure 5, seeing the townspeople, the patients, and the many bastards out there. He is called from his chair. Ah, what sort of man was Williams? Ezra, you have been second always. Tragical. Ezra, Espo, il miglior fabbro, stands pallidly behind Bill, second always, posing for the camera. Exposed again, cloaked in the mousseline of Kos, and looks inwardly, smiling, distant, recalling, or seeming desperately to recall the Poikilotron, which he knows by heart. Moose and the V for you of Romagna, and Styrax and the very old lady of Ritratto, knowing a quarter note, 16th, a quarter note, 8th note, 16th note, 16th note, quarter note, from quarter note, 16th note, 16th note, half note. Eels from Rhombus, and the many spirits from Lemures. Ezra, no, there was nothing, in the whole and all nothing that's quite your own. Yet, this is you. What sort of man was Pound? And of the other poet, Old Possum, that deep and inscrutable singular name, he is elsewhere, yet here too, smiling, distant. I too am here, and I should have the right to smile. Thank you. And now for a little levity, I hope. This is a poem from, again, from Exercises in High Treason. the digital thermometer. So much depends upon a digital thermometer packaged in shrink wrap beside the pillboxes. So many rear ends have felt a rectal thermometer, dazed with fever upon their sick beds. So many depend upon testing their thermometers right in the store. So, the Red Wheelbarrow actually began its life in the Rutherford Public Library. Then, for many, many years, we moved over to the Williams Center. Now we're at the Little Theater at Felician University, which is the former Fairleigh Dickinson University. So this is a poem that's set at the Williams Center. It's from my book, Inside Out, Upside Down, and Round and Round. It's called Unreeling. At the Williams Center, cinema below, I saw a film, unreeled, tangled on the floor. The projection is wound up and reeling, rewinding the roll, unraveled, tangled from the door down along the hall. Beside himself and the coils, he said, "It'll take hours." Unreal. At the Cinémathèque La Hoboken, they were not showing a film last night. Last night in Rutherford. Unreal. So another very interesting friend of William Carlos Williams, besides Baroness Elsa, who was a German artist and writer and just really very disruptive person, really an amazing modernist. I mean, she's getting to be better known. Another person who was somewhat of a footnote years ago, who is now quite well known and who had actually a complete retrospective up in Maine last year was Mina Loy. She and William Carlos Williams are very good friends. They starred in several plays for the Provincetown Players when we were in Greenwich Village, Manhattan. So this is a poem called, and it's about extreme states, let's say. Man Ray and Mina Loy are raping me. Man Ray and Mina Loy are raping me, and I'm loving it. Not the Weimaraner, not for the Hollywood actress, not Fay Ray, not Myrna Loy, but the artist and the poet, and you know it. I'm loving it. The late sequential phone calls in midnight madness, the police standing at my door, demonic attractions, visitors, the dark places, the 1,000 steps, 10,000 stairs, the stars. I'm loving it. Who's that clogging up my pores? We have karma in the apartment, we have karma at the house, but who will change the light bulb? Naked in Europe, one survives earthquakes in Assisi and heat waves in Wiesbaden, cold espresso cocktails and only fresh fruit and Fruchtgummi, Gorgonzola Tedesca. Alpestron amnesia in dancing clothes. One stays alone because, no one shares a room with John, the Don. I'm loving it. But who will change the light bulb? And as one gazes at La Pigna di San Pietro, not Pignoli, Pinoli, the Queen of Heaven's pessary plugging up the Vatican, one longs for the comedy to be finished, the comedo to be extracted, the cone to come undone. Man Ray and Mina Loy are raping me, and I'm loving it. So also from here, I have a good friend, some of you know him by the name of Don Zerilli. He's a wonderful poet, lives in Sussex County. So this is a poem about, well, I guess I could say it's a poem about him. And his wife, who's also a great poet, C.D. Russell. Tomorrow it's asparagus. Tomorrow it's asparagus, the husband offers. His wife will serve asparagus in at least 3 ways. according to their unspoken pact. Asparagus, the food chosen in advance this day. Radishes yesterday for today's meal. Squash the day before. On the edge of suburbia, just within the rural expanse, the couple, pinguescent and reserved, wiping away the vestiges of city life, will dine later than most on asparagus quiche, blanched asparagus almondine, quail with asparagus mousse à la apicius, a salad of asparagus vinaigrette, and fried asparagus spears. Tomorrow night, the husband in from work, the air of their settled home will carry the flavorings they savor over dinner. And later, in the wee hours, toward bedtime upstairs, the air will waft downstairs with memories of asparagus. Two other good friends of William Carlos Williams were the aforementioned Alfred Stieglitz, who lived here in Hoboken at one time, and his, at this time, 1920, his girlfriend, she later became his wife, Georgia O'Keeffe, the great, great painter. So this is, I didn't bring it, I should have, but there's a portrait of her, it's a headshot of her staring at the camera, and with this branch of fruit, a branch with two pieces of fruit sort of rudely hanging sort of in her face. So I call, the title of that photograph is Georgia O'Keeffe, Head, Late George. Georgia, and so the title of the poem is Georgia O'Keeffe, Giving Head at Late George to Big Al and the viewer in an eternal headshot. Intruding upon her face-off with the camera, breaking into the frame from the left, obscene in its ripeness, the fruit-filled frondage as envisioned by Carlo Crevelli, gestures at a Georgian Georgia, with an intentness and intensity reserved for certain gourds and other organs of pleasure and pain, of ripeness and readiness, of prompt succor. Like an insolent tassel of hair, like a fat tassel at the drape of a window, like a fleshy process or proboscis, like a throbbing theribolum just before it shoots its wad of frankincense to the limits of the lacunaria. I'm reaching here. Like that inevitable Crevellian cucumber that insults the virgin Theotokos. Like the pendulum of my grandfather's clock, too large for the shelf. Like my dick. Like Alfred's dick, like the tick-tock of a cock about to blow and shoot its spasms of jism on the face of a proto-atheo, agnostico, eco-lesbian, in her unsullied lushness of youth, long before the dryness of an Mexican arroyo courses the striations of her ancient magmatic mood, long before them dry bones bone her dry. She is still cool and wet as the rain on the lake, and she remains ahead. Thank you. Now, to conclude, three short pieces that have been published, but not in any of my books yet, because they're new, and as we say in Jersey City, I'm not going to say it. New shit. Relatively. At Fabiola's. Ancient women being extracted from Fabiola's with canes and walkers after getting their hair starched and tinted and being helped into their waiting transportation, blocking the flow of traffic every time I try to pass by. At Fabiola's. So I've written a number of books, a number of poems about zoos, various zoos, including the first and last poem in the first section of Inside Out, Upside Down, and Round and Round. This is a recent one, which dates me, unfortunately, but that's okay. Zoophilia, National Zoo, Washington, D.C. On the 8th grade trip to the nation's capital, the monkeys in their cage, shrieking loudly, threw shit at each other. A few of the males stood up or squatted in the front and masturbated toward the crowds. The giant pandas in their habitat, Ling Ling and Sing Sing, were too freaked out to fuck or even show their faces. Zoophilia. So, my final poem also relates to an eminent resident of New Jersey, in this case Westfield, New Jersey. Some of you may know of the life and crimes of John List, who killed his entire family, went on the run, and they didn't discover the bodies for months. So the title of the poem is List. Helen is on the floor in the ballroom. The kids, Patricia, John Jr., and Frederick, are on the floor in the ballroom. Mother, Alma, is in the hallway in the attic, 3rd floor. She was too heavy to move. I am out of here. Thank you. Wow.
Thank you, John J. Trautman. Let's hear it from him. He is always a trip listening to him. I mean, he's fearless as a poet, and I so respect that. Claudia Serea is a Romanian-American poet, translator, and editor with work published in Consequence Forum, The Southern Review, Field, New Letters, Prairie Schooner, Oxford Poetry, among others, as well as featured on the Writer's Almanac. She is the author of 7 poetry collections and 4 chapbooks, most recently, in those years, No One Slept, which is Broadstone Books 2023. Serea won a pushcart prize, the Joanne Scott Kennedy Memorial Prize from the Poetry Society of Virginia, and the New Letters Readers Award for her poems. She is a founding editor of National Translation Month, serves on the board of the Red Wheelbarrow Poets, and co-hosts their monthly readings. Let's hear it for Claudia Serea.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, thanks for being here. Thank you Vera and Danny for inviting us to read. I've never been to the Hoboken Historical Museum. It's a great honor. So I didn't bring William's poems to read. I just wanted to share a few details, personal details. When I got to Rutherford in 2002, after being in Queens for 7 years, I didn't know about Williams at all. I didn't know who he was, I didn't know his poetry, anything at all. And I wasn't writing in English at that time, so I was only writing in Romanian. And it wasn't until 2004 that I started to write in English, and also in 2006 when I met the group that will be known since then, was known as the Red Wheelbarrow Poets, based in Rutherford, New Jersey. We met as John mentioned, at the Rutherford Public Library, at the Williams Center, the City Hall, and different, at the Gainwell Cafe, everywhere. So, at the Williams Center. So, over the years, that's when I heard of the Williams, because this group carries on the Williams legacy in Rutherford, or at least we're trying to. And it essentially changed my writing style, my entire aesthetic at that point, because I was a new writer in English. I just kind of like abandoned a whole bunch of stuff, or not entirely abandoned, but just put to the side stuff that I had learned in growing up in Romania, and started from scratch writing in English in the Williams tradition. So that's that's my connection, my direct connection with Williams. Another direct connection is that he shares a birthday with my father, born on 17th September. And it's kind of, little detail that I like. So, a few words about the Red Wheelbarrow Poets. We've been active since 2006. It's an evolving group, but it's led right now by the so-called Gang of Six, which is myself, Dan Ziridi, Frank Rubino, Arthur Russell, Antonia Kovlev, and Moira O'Brien. And we have a weekly poetry workshop on Zoom, led by Arthur Russell and Frank Rubino, and a monthly first Wednesday of the month reading at the Little Theatre in Felician University Little Theatre in Rutherford. And everyone is invited to attend. It's great fun. We also have an annual journal which we will launch this year on October 9th. So please come. It's a great celebration. It's going to be a house full of people celebrating poetry in Rutherford. So join us if you can, or if you're inclined to. You're welcome to do so. So one of the sayings that I learned from the Red Wheelbarrow Poets, I think it's a misquote. It's one of the it's a motto of our annual journal. The epic is the local realized. Okay, so I don't know exactly if it's a misquote by Williams. The epic is the local realized. So the question is, which local is it? In my case, I have a Romanian local and I have a Rutherford local. And so my books are kind of about those two places. I write about Romania a lot, and I write a little bit about the United States, about my immigration story. So I want to read from In Those Years No One Slept, which was published last year by Brownstone Books. I'll start with the title poem. In those years, no one slept, and the epigraph is, out in the sky, no one sleeps, no one, by Federico Garcia Lorca. Some, like my grandfather, slept standing, hiding among corn stalks and listening for dogs. The woods were full of women dressed in black. The woods were full of veiled women who'd come to him and ask, "Did you see my son? Is he still alive?" The woods were full of veiled women and young men sleeping, standing behind every tree trunk. The woods were full. Young men wore rifles and slept standing behind every tree trunk. The women were dressed in black with large wings on their backs. Did you see my son, my husband, brother? The woods were full. So were the cemeteries. Everyone slept standing. So this is a book that has a lot of references from the history of Romania and Eastern Europe, and my own childhood. Here's a poem titled How I Earned 10 Lei in Second Grade. Loudly, quickly, and badly, that's how the famous musicians play, Mr. Dreyfus said, and no one notices their mistakes because they don't stop. So you should never stop, not for any parent entering the auditorium, not for the principal blowing his nose, not even if you see a mouse running across the stage. The next day at the quarterly exam, we sat on wooden chairs on stage in a semicircle, waiting our turn. My knees were shaking, and I felt sick when they called my name. I stepped to the front of the stage, facing the judges, comrade, principal, Mr. Trifu, and two other violin teachers, seated at the long table covered in red velvet. Mrs. Gussie at the piano gave a nod and I began playing, trembling as loudly and quickly as I could, and I knew it was bad because I got some notes wrong and hoped the piano covered them, so I didn't stop, not even when the neon light on the ceiling flickered and the tube came down crashing with a bang at my feet, and Mrs. Gussie gasped and comrade principal froze and everyone stopped but me, with my white stockings and starched fresh-pressed uniform and huge bows rustling on my head like pigeon wings. I kept playing with quivering knees and queasy stomach, screeching, mosquitoing, wailing on my small violin, loudly, quickly, and badly in that deep silence. I never stopped until the end when Mr. Trifle got up, clapped, took out the 10-lei bill from his wallet and handed it to me. So I grew up in communist Romania, and this year we're celebrating 35 years since December 1989, when it was the Romanian Revolution, and it was the only violent regime change in Eastern Europe. So I wrote a poem. This poem was awarded the Pushcart Prize last year, and it's titled "Making Sausage in the Time of Revolution." This sausage is best made during martial law. Lights turned off and a window covered with a heavy blanket that still lets through the white streaks of the tracers in the night sky. Place a candle in the cup. In its shaky light we look like ghosts. Think of the ghosts in the streets. Think of the fires on barricades, the only candles their souls will have. On the table set up the cast iron grinder with its large enameled maul, its helix, gears, and iron clamp. Think of the tanks and armored vehicles advancing like huge night insects, tens of boots grinding the pavement. Start grinding the lean meat and the white belly fat piece by piece, one red chunk, one white, one red, one white, red and white. Stuff the grinder, careful to not catch your fingers. Think of the grinder that smashes students, young men and women shouting, "Libertate te iubim, or învingem, or murim." Freedom, we love you, we either win or die. Grind, 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 grind. Stop and listen to explosions and the giddy chatter of the guns. Add salt, pepper to taste, crushed cloves of garlic and powdered sweet paprika. Taste the tear gas and pepper spray on students' faces. Sink your hands into the meat paste, hungry roots that turn and lift it, turn and lift again until blended and smooth. Add a little bone soup to soften the mix. Think of the water cannons, clotted body drenched in cold December. Pull the thin, almost transparent intestine onto the machine spout, bunched up, white like the stocking of a high school girl. Think of that girl crowned with sniper bullets and start pushing the paste in the machine against the machine. Push, 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 push. With the force of a mudslide, its rage and fear and abandon. Push, 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 until the dawn is born, unrecognizable and wet, and sanitation trucks roll in to wash the blood from the pavement. The candle burns to the bottom. The only thing that remains is the smoke. So then I moved to the United States in 1995, and here's a little poem titled April in Queens. On a cloudy day, the angel goes to the tool shed, where he keeps on shelves neatly stacked surgical instruments, wrenches, screwdrivers, hammers, oil canisters, gauze, rope, glass bottles with acid, crystals, formal, fragrances, and jars with nails and soaps. He picks the steel tank labeled life and sprays the dirt in the front yard green. I want to read a poem titled 1954. It's inspired by my father, I guess, 1954. In 1954, hands in his pockets, Frank O'Hara was walking at noon on the glaring New York City streets, thinking of poems and lunch. At 7 p.m., the sun was still strong in Romania. My father was 14 at the time, and plowed his father's land hard as concrete, with a horse blind in one eye, thinking no doubt about poems and dinner. On Fifth Avenue, O'Hara stopped, lit a cigarette, breathed in the smoke, and looked at the sky. My father stopped and smoked too, maybe even at the same time, inhaled, exhaled, and looked at the same sky. Yes, they were young, skinny, and thoughtful, and didn't know each other. But I imagined them sharing the gestures of lighting up. Tight lips holding the cigarette, the flicker, the blue breath, the crust of the earth, the sun. Decades later, I'm reading the lunch poems on the bus, and think of the lives of these two men, each one caught in his own grinding machine. And a rabbit runs from the field in Romania into a bar in New York City, foolish enough to believe it can escape. So, I go visit every year, and the recent Ukraine war is another recent war. So this is a poem I wrote a while ago when it first started. It's called Eastern European Dawn. My father tells me over the phone he'd emigrate even now in his old age. It's good to have your daughter in America. I'm his insurance policy against history. He thinks about me late at night when he hears the news about tanks in the distance, a pack of dogs barking on the border. The night leads its edge into dawn, a dawn he recognizes, one he has seen before. Its color, carnivorous rose. So when I go visit, we have family gatherings, and we talk politics. It's like a national pastime in Romania. And this is a poem titled "The Moon, My Brother and I." The moon, my brother and I sit outside at the wooden table, covered with a white cloth, and drink wine and moonshine from shiny tumblers. And we figure out the Americans, the Russians, the Romanians, the EU, and the Chinese. We're well versed in this from decades behind the Iron Curtain. We know all about special interests, corporations, the military complex, stolen revolutions, the FSB, the Mossad, the CIA, the nationalists, and the globalists. Pour me some more freedom, baby brother. Alcohol makes us understand more. In its glaze, we see clearer for a few brief moments and agree. We're fucked. And we sleep well tonight, happy at least we get it. Until morning, when everything is different. So this is another poem for my father about hopping. I wonder if the water in his lungs is salty, like the waves lapping at my feet. He once told me if I passed the entrance exam to the university, he'd take me bar hopping, and I laughed. Why would I go bar hopping with my father? I got past the exam, and we never went to any bars or to the Black Sea again. Now the sea has come back searching for him. Water climbed into his lungs, and the machine pumps oxygen to help him breathe, in and out, like the tides. If he were awake, I'd tell him, when you get out of the hospital, I'll take you bar hopping and to the beach again. The sea rolls on the shore, endless hope, endless, endless, endless. A few years ago, and He's feeling a little better now. And this poem, Climbing. Each year, my parents grow smaller summer to summer. They lighten up, climbing into old age like into a tree, shedding their shoes, coats, hats, shirts, socks, pocket change, mom's purse, dad's wristwatch, their wedding rings. I wonder if they transfer their weight onto me, if I get heavier year to year, if my words or my dreams get denser, and I carry them slower, like rocks or lead in my pockets. My parents get lighter and lighter like birds or balloons, rising into the old age tree until I can't see them any longer, but I know they're still there, climbing, hidden from view among the tall branches. And I'll close with this little poem that's known to Dr. Williams. This is just to say poem, no plums. It's titled, Forgive Me, I Ate Summer. It was fuzzy and still warm from the sun. I bit into its orb, slurped its juices, and some of them dripped on my chin. A few threads of flesh got stuck in my teeth. Long after the last gulp, I kept tasting it in the sky of my mouth. It was delicious, it was delicious, it was delicious. And now it's gone. The last one, forgive me, from our tree of summers. All that's left of it, hold out your hand, love. It's this wrinkled, poked pit.
Thank you, Claudia. Those poems were so poignant, and the one about politics being the national pastime in Romania, you're in the right place, because politics happens to be the national pastime of Hoboken. So it was perfect. I just want to mention someone who should be here but is not, is Frank Rubino, who was the Red Wheelbarrow's feature poet in 2021. But his book, Frank's Lunch Service, is forthcoming in 2025, and he lives in Montclair, New Jersey. I'd like to bring up my good friend, the museum's good friend, Joe Lewis, a writer based in Hoboken, New Jersey. He is the author of a whole bunch of poetry books, the most recent being Well You Needn't, or soon-to-be most recent one, from Hanging Loose Press. His prose writings have appeared in a lot of places, including Poets and Writers, Wire, UK, Mojo, Utney Reader, Talisman, and No Placebos. Kim Lyons has noted that there is no one writing quite like him, and I attest to that. But she goes on to say, Kim Lyons goes on to say, as if Charles Olson and Susie Timmons had a baby. Joe Lewis.
Thank you, Danny, for putting this together. Unfortunately, Williams should be better known in the state. I was the initiator of the ill-fated New Jersey Poet Laureates Award. And when we got this through, it was just sort of a conversation between a former student of mine's friend who was working in the state legislature. And she said, what can we do for poetry in the state house? I said, poet laureate? And I said the magic words, New York State has one. And then I paid no attention. She called me back and said, we have someone to sponsor this bill in the State House. And after that, I got a call from the New Jersey Council on Humanities saying, well, this is going to happen. Who should we name this after? And I said, well, Lippman's been taken. New York State, that's the name of the other award. He says, what about William Carlos Williams? She said, who's he? And I had to say, Pulitzer Prize doctor, and that convinced her. But the thing with Williams is that he's sort of present from us in a way that poets of his era aren't. I saw Kat was holding up the old New Directions selected poems that was edited by Randall Jarrell, which James Laughlin, the publisher at the time, thought was a big coup, that Randall Jarrell. People don't really read Randall Jarrell anymore or even aware of him. A lot of his people who were well known in his era, Mark Van Doren, who was major writer. All of his work is out of print. Edward Arlington Robinson, whose book sold like 100,000 copies, his biggest book. But the thing about Williams is that he still speaks to us. I think a couple of reasons is that he's secular in a way that, like most people are in those days. He's not a religious poet. In fact, he even has a poem called about friends who were being religious and wondering what the deal with that was. He's really the first major American poet who comes from immigrants. His father was English, raised in the Caribbean, his mother was Puerto Rican, and their home language was Spanish. This is what he grew up, speaking. He also had the fortune of hanging around some of the major figures of the avant-garde in that period. The Steinway Circle. He was friends with George Antile, who wrote the composition Ballet Mécanique. He knew Man Ray. He saw Isadora Duncan dance. I mean, unfortunately, poetry, like American poetry, lags about 75 years among other traditions in the arts. It's sort of slow to catch on to stuff, and he was there at that point to catch on to people. He also, among the poets of his period, is pretty liberal. He even wrote like a poem about Franklin Roosevelt when he died. Stevens lived through the war. There's no poems about the war. Marianne Moore. His two sons served during World War II. So there's a lot of things that speak to us today as a writer. He even, in late interviews, talked about he was in favor of socialized medicine, which would now be called Obamacare or something, something close, which was a big thing for a doctor to say in the 50s. I'm in favor of socialized medicine. So there's a lot in his work that's still, because we're reading poems that are, some of the old ones, about 100 years old, and they seem very contemporary. I retired as a social worker. Actually, this is the first anniversary that I was liberated. And when I worked at a group home, I had This Is Just to Say. It was a poster I got from the Dodge Foundation, and I put it up in my office, and when a new kid would come in, we'd talk with them, what you're doing here, and then I'd ask them to read the poem, and most did, but the ones who I said, could you read that poem? He looked at me and said, why the fuck should I do that? It meant that the kid was illiterate. He couldn't, it was sort of my signal to tell the debtors that this kid can't read that, this kid can't read that poem. So William, I'm reading mostly from earlier work, and it was kind of a good opportunity to update my, looking at using the Williams principles to bring some of the things up. So the first poem is a poem that's really directed at, what's the name of that poem of Williams you read?
I know it. Pastoral.
Pastoral. So there's a whole series of poems that Williams writes where he's really discovering this American idiom. And he ends these, like yours is, this is an astonishment. There's another poem where he does this little pastoral scene of Rutherford or Passaic or Paterson, because he actually maintained a doctor's office in Rutherford, had an office in Passaic, and he was head of obstetrics at Paterson General, which is now Passaic General, in Wayne. And my college that I went to, William Paterson, has a full collection of Williams' signed books, because the hospital and the college were across the street from each other back when they were both in Paterson. So this is a poem called Wallington, New Jersey, which is one of the places that William served as a pediatrician. His most read work are his short stories, because they're all in the books for college use or books in high school. High school readers, most of his short stories are about 5 pages, so they kind of fit in the curriculum. But he did a series of short stories in the collected stories called Life Along the Passaic River, where he talks about being a doctor in depression and people paying him off in eggs, or you want a chicken? You know, I can't, okay. So this is called Wallington, New Jersey. Starts off from being in college. Someone had carved on my desk, some people, Wallington, Poland on the Passaic. And I kind of took it from there. Night factory hearts glow on the Passaic's bank, and the soot falls thick on Wallington like a fat head's hat. And behind many upstairs chintz curtain kitchens, the pierogies are bobbing like Delmar Beach jellyfish into the steaming whirlpool of an enamel pot. Outside, on Hoboken Avenue, pallid ethnic Poles return to the door of a certain deli famous for homemade russet poops of kielbasa. And happy families at the Wallington Exchange made short work of the 9-course Slavic feast, while Al Pitkowski's polka committee releases happy mazurkas that lift across the acres of 2-family forts, cold sleeping cars. And all this at the end of a good day's work. And this is called New Jersey. It was just originally a poem, but I said this is New Jersey. These are sort of updates. And originally, it had Chicken Holiday. This is 40 years ago. I said, there's no more Chicken Holidays. So I put in Kiki Riki. Do people know this? This is like a chain of Peruvian chicken places that you see all over the area. New Jersey. A big beige Chrysler at dusk lights up a limestone Madonna with blinding halogen headlights as it turns the corner onto Bergenline Avenue, where teenagers are gathered beneath Kiki Riki's torn awning, waiting out the walkable rain. On the Hudson Palisades, silent, I walk along Boulevard East, a dead ash, the clear autumn in the park, leafless, frozen under lamp. The moon's a hook tonight, the tree a dark tear against that city of occupied lights. Moonlight with memories. We moved down the Palisades to Weehawken. Empire State's lit vertex doused at midnight, but we did not sleep. All night long, we heard the branches of the full saucer magnolias let fall white salmon flowers. Hoboken, early Sunday morning. In the middle of the Willow Avenue viaduct, I saw an old man wearing a baseball cap backwards like a Rutgers frat brother. He was walking the early morning darkness towards Malibu Diner on 14th Street. He had a jaunty, old-time stride, like he owned the empty, sleeping city in his head. And I discovered, in sort of revising the poem, that the viaduct, which many of you may have gone over on your way into the city, is a WPA project built in the 30s to eliminate a grade crossing of the road below. Spanky Bannon removes his famous pan-fried bologna sandwich from the menu. It was too much trouble for a buck. People wanted mustard. People wanted mayonnaise. To hell with it. The establishing metaphor of my career as a social worker, and this is for fellow poet and former social worker Kim Lyons. Walking up the stairs of the J Street station, the guy ahead of me's bow-legged seeing eye dog, pissing casually down the steps. And this is from a sequence. I really had to dig into my computer and convert the Word files into something that I could read. It's called In Hoboken. I'm just going to read a few poems from In Hoboken. Number 2. Here's that woman I've seen on Hoboken streets for years. Man, is she tough looking. An imposing woman, says my wife. I'd like to ask her what she does for a living, but I'm afraid she'd sew my ass to my lips and laugh about it. 3. The overpriced restaurant is empty again tonight. The bored waitstaff has run out of exotic locales to daydream about. 6. To Sinatra. I pass your birthplace, Chairman, now a vacant lot on Monroe Street, and wonder if you'd like my poetry, or just see me as that sort of artsy slob you'd love to beat up, that kind of guy who would yawn in front of a woman. And that last line, I interviewed some guy who did a book, like Sinatra's last set of interviews was this Bill Zemeckis, and it was to show you how long ago it was done by fax. You would ask him fax and questions, and he'd fax back. And the book was sort of like a kind of guide to life, you know, and Sinatra said, what shouldn't, you know, guide to is you gotta dress up, and you can't yawn in front of a woman. You know, this is really, you know, good. 7. Hearing Coltrane in the headphones allows me some belief in the transcendent as the Hudson Place ATM swallows my MAC card. And this is called Then Let Fall, kind of a more, kind of sort of when I moved into Hoboken, so it's a little more, and it was also at the time I moved into Hoboken, the old crowd complained about the yuppies. They didn't put up curtains in their windows. We had, what was our car? It was the car we were.
That's for New Sunset.
Yeah, someone, you know, they were punching in windows, you know, and they were just mad at new people. They punched in art, you know. It was like a manual drive. It was this kind of crap. I mean, I could see if we had like a BMW or something. It says, okay, class hatred. But this was like, you know, Then Let Fall. I see the speed bumps of autumn rising from the Whole Foods car park. Oh, and I also kind of updated the references. I said, you know, I need to relate to the current 21st century audience. I see the speed bumps of autumn rising from the Whole Foods car park, and from the salt flat of Slough's Meadows, I hear the midnight ferry's fact of occasion, a muscular foghorn spreading between both banks of the Hudson. Here we are on the wrong time again, and as I walk the spine between the old Todd shipyards and Hoboken's newest annually soaked bistros, it all seems a policeman's dream built from the bones of watered-down cogs. Geography made a pact with this city, as it did with that filled-in neighbor island of occupied lights. The clock has me, and that dark river seems squandered on all this human forest. The trees on King's Bluff have gone November bare, and great cracks of thought hang between the indigo sky and the Lincoln Tunnel helix. So do what you can along the broken outskirts, and what you thought you owned is only someone else's reason to rage, and the social cohesion here gets washed off the native grit straight into the catch basins along with the stormwater. I first found out about Williams. I went to William Paterson University, which I really prefer to be called William Paterson College, because we used to call it Lee Party constantly, with the initials. And I commuted by bus, so I had to get off in Paterson and wait for the bus that takes me up to the hill. And I used to ride up with this fellow student who's an older guy, who was like living in the YMCA in town, and he one day out of nowhere says, you know, there was a poet who wrote a book about this city, Paterson, you should get it. And it used to be an old-time department store. Kat, I'm sure you went there, maybe even shoplifted from it, called Meyer Brothers.
Oh, sure.
You sure? Okay. And if you remember the bookstore, they used to have a really old-fashioned luncheonette that served kind of old-fashioned sort of ladies' luncheonette, cottage cheese, clean peach kind of stuff. And there was a book alcove, and there was Paterson. And it was like it was a copy waiting for me because it was still one of the New Direction's earliest paperbacks, had side sewn covers, you know, as opposed to the glue-in, you know, why your paperback books fall apart at a certain point. It was sewn in, you know, it was like $2, which even in 1973 was pretty cheap. And that was sort of my first book. It led me to Charles Olson, and it had a lot of, have a book-length poem about Staten Island, which sort of gets inspired by Paterson. So I did a series of poems called North Jersey Elegies, which were published initially in Social Text, which is a kind of Marxist magazine. So I guess it was politically correct. And the guy who, you know, the movie The Runaways, The Wanderers, was on the board of Social Text.
Richard Price.
No, not Richard, no, what was it? Let's skip that, because I'm going to have to remember that novel later. This is called Main Street Paterson. And in looking at it, because this was published a while ago, I think about that cities like Paterson, Hackensack, you know, have kind of really been recharged by immigrants who have come into the city. You know, Paterson has become a foodie paradise because there's, you know, there's a massive Middle East section jobbed and has recharged these cities. Hackensack, the last time I went there was to file papers for regarding my mother's death, with empty stores. And the last time I was there, really happening, you know, and these stores are all rented, so there is continuity. And people here, Danny and I are children of immigrants, and we have a person from Romania here, you know, and I think other readers come from that background, so this is the kind of energy that you see in Williams' work, you know. He always felt like an outsider, like most people. There's a kind of pissed off quality to William Carlos Williams, because if you read his autobiography, he did his medical residence back in his days. You did your undergraduate as a medical student, and then you went on to the residency. And he got a residency at Flower Fifth Avenue Hospital, which that was the way to get a office on Fifth Avenue. And he was a resident, and they were giving him doctored like roster sheets. They were like adding names onto the sheets, I guess, to boost the money or ask for it, and he refused to sign it. So they removed him from his residency, and he had to finish it off in New Jersey, which he was trying to escape from. And he refers to this a lot in his autobiographies. There's a certain pistol quality that you could also see in the films of Kevin Smith's early movies and early Springsteen. Like why am I here? So this is Main Street Paterson. Coffee may produce an illusion of alertness. TV shrinks the world to 5 basic shots, makes it gentle on overtaxed brains. On the end of this street is dappled sky above the watch-ons, and past those mountains and all these blocks, my dumb feet pass breathes nickel smoke on the curves. The rooftop squads sound the low putter above Fair Street's West Indian stalls, and L'Enfant's imprint remains at the core, circular streets surrounding the unwashed marble of the Carrera Hastings Civic Hall. This city choked by its destiny, short-term pantheon of the industrial past. The city is walking museum. The ghost factory smoke caught in my lungs, and an entire district of old silk mills restored to a bright condition, dressed in a false history. So why am I flustered at the logic of dollars progress? I'm full of mist-dawn Aprils at the great fall's cusp, and of that cheap, marbled notebook filled with my first writings that bobbed above the urban limits. And this redignified waterfall and those reanimated mills appear as the faded Persia of a once optimistic syntax, we once thought an elegance at least 10 years from this writing, as if plundered from the core of bright bug recall. The greed in this geography is what's left of a contract that is a city, and of money paying for one's daily unfinished indignation. And I'll finish off, it's one of the few poems from my early days that I still read. It's called Hoboken in Advance of the Sunset. And I decided to leave the reference to the German bakery, which is now Carlos, Carlos's bakery in there. It's called Hoboken in the Advance of the Sunset. Needless and undefined dimensions limn my stride of jazz's intuitive process and the voluptuous latitudes that name a city. The ancient air flails above my head, and the menu for Washington Street seems a utopia of muscular teens, aging young mothers, and one old German bakery still absorbing City Hall's wail in its strudel-full panes. The quiet tension of mass isolation plays against the slanting presence of late afternoon light. The stoplights change in chronic order, while a blue domino pizza wagon burns rubber out towards the lowlands of Frank Sinatra Drive, as my thoughts swerve towards my funhouse reflection in an old woman's glasses. Twilight creeps above the yard with neon, boosted by Linden's fierce petrol Sirocco. We like it like that. I arrive to listen. The reticent world's sense of the fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe Lewis. Thank you, Claudia Serea. Thank you, John J. Krause. Thank you, Catherine Doty. Thank you, Frank Carino. But most importantly, thank you, audience. You have been wonderful. And of course, thank you, Dr. William Carlos Williams, for inspiring us all.